Don't drop your dentures, Mom. My son smirked, spooning chowder like I was already half gone. His wife laughed, sharp, loud, as if Toothless was just another harmless joke. 47 years of motherhood, and now I was the brittle punchline at my own dinner table. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just swallowed the insult and planned my revenge in ink. By the time dessert arrived, my will was already changing. Wait. Before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The harbor wind pushed through the open-air windows of the restaurant, carrying the briny tang of salt water and the faint sweetness of fried hush puppies. Evelyn Harper sat upright at the table, her hands folded neatly on the napkin in her lap, a posture her late husband had once called regal. Across from her, Jason leaned back in his chair, lips curled into a smirk that already hinted trouble. "Careful, Mom," Jason drawled, tapping the rim of his beer glass against the table for effect. "Don't drop your dentures in the chowder. Tip steepa 7. My to 7 over we minimum on the fixed 7. Melissa's laugh burst out like a squeal, too loud for the cozy dining room, too sharp for comfort. She clapped a manicured hand over her mouth, as though suddenly aware of the stares from the nearby tables. But the damage was already done. Heat flared up Evelyn's cheeks, crawling toward her temples. The silverware in front of her blurred for a second, her eyes burning. She could have spoken. She had words sharper than oyster shells, but she swallowed them down with a slow sip of water. The ice clicked against her teeth, loud in her ears. The waitress, Nora, reappeared at the table with a practiced smile, balancing a tray of crab cakes and steaming bowls of she-crab soup. Her eyes flicked to Evelyn, then darted away just as quickly. She had heard the jab. She'd seen the way Melissa's laughter cut the air. Nora set the plates down carefully, her movements steady, but her lips tightened, betraying the sympathy she couldn't openly show. Evelyn offered her a polite nod of thanks, though her throat felt dry. Jason, oblivious, reached for the bread basket as though he were the host instead of a guest. Melissa leaned toward him, whispering something about how quaint the decor looked, like an old beach rental dressed up for tourists. They snickered between themselves, their laughter quiet but sharp enough to slice Evelyn's composure. The candlelight flickered across Evelyn's untouched chowder, the cream cooling by the minute. She stirred it once, just to occupy her hands, but her appetite had fled the moment Jason's words hit the air. Toothless. Dentures, weak, each syllable echoed louder in her head than the chatter of the other diners or the gulls crying outside. Jason leaned closer, lowering his voice with mock sincerity. "Come on, Mom. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." Melissa sipped her wine, eyes glinting with approval at his cruelty. "He's teasing, Evelyn. You know how he is." Evelyn inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her years of teaching high school had taught her how to face down arrogance, though she rarely expected it to come from her own flesh and blood. She pressed her lips into the faintest smile, a gesture that revealed nothing. Silence, she decided, was stronger than snapping back in this moment. The meal dragged on, their conversation floating between Jason's work complaints and Melissa's gossip about a neighbor's facelift. Evelyn responded politely when required, but she no longer tasted the seafood, no longer noticed the harbor view that usually calmed her. Each laugh from across the table chipped away at her patience, leaving a cold, steady anger in its place. When the bill finally arrived, Jason made a show of sliding his credit card onto the tray, as though he were the benevolent provider. Evelyn thanked Nora directly, meeting her eyes this time. The waitress gave her the briefest nod, subtle yet full of understanding, before retreating to the back. That tiny acknowledgement warmed Evelyn more than the entire meal had. Outside, the Charleston evening wrapped the waterfront in lavender twilight. The air was thick with salt, and the faint diesel of boats heading in for the night. Jason and Melissa strode ahead, laughing again, their voices bouncing off the brick buildings. Evelyn lingered behind, letting their noise fade into the street traffic. She unlocked her car with deliberate slowness, every movement precise, her mind already turning. Back at her townhouse in the historic district, shadows stretched long across the polished wood floors. Evelyn hung her purse by the door, removed her shoes, and eased herself into the armchair where she so often read late into the night. The quiet was a balm, broken only by the faint hum of a passing carriage on the cobblestones outside. Her phone buzzed on the side table. It was Doris Caldwell. A simple text, "How was dinner?" Evelyn stared at the glowing screen, her lips tightening. She could picture Doris's expectant face, could almost hear her friend's laugh. Slowly, Evelyn typed back, her fingers firm on each key. "They called me Toothless," she wrote. Her thumb hovered over send for a moment before she pressed it down. The phone screen dimmed, leaving her reflection staring back at her, calm, composed but burning underneath. She leaned back, the anger settling into something sharper, something deliberate. Her second message followed with a certainty that surprised even her. "I'll prove I'm not." The townhouse was still as Evelyn Harper moved through it, the floorboards creaking faintly beneath her slippers. The laughter from dinner still lingered in her ears like an unpleasant perfume, clinging no matter how she tried to shake it off. Jason's smirk, Melissa's shrill laugh, the word toothless echoing in her head as though he'd etched it onto the walls of her mind. In the dim glow of her desk lamp, she opened the drawer of the mahogany desk her husband once used for grading papers. The brass handle resisted for a moment, stiff with age, before sliding open to reveal a folder tucked neatly beneath old tax returns and bank statements. The edges were worn soft from years of being handled but rarely studied. Her will. She drew it out with deliberate care, as though the act itself could summon steadiness. The paper smelled faintly of ink and dust, a reminder of the years she had let it sit untouched. She spread the pages across the desk blotter, her eyes scanning the neat paragraphs that had once felt so final. And there it was, clear as print could be. Jason Harper listed as the sole heir. Her jaw tightened. Jason who mocked her over soup. Jason who strutted through life with an arrogance so loud it drowned out his decency. She traced his name with the tip of her finger, the way one might outline a scar, then looked further down. Melissa's name was absent, of course. Evelyn had never intended to leave a single cent to her, but she knew, bone deep, that Melissa was the hand steering Jason's greed. The way she had laughed tonight wasn't amusement, it was ownership. The paper trembled slightly as Evelyn's hand clenched tighter. Her nails tapped against the desk, a restless rhythm that betrayed her calm exterior. For years she had thought the will was a matter of obligation, a simple act of keeping things tidy, but now it looked like a leash. One Jason and Melissa believed was already in their grasp. The phone sat beside her elbow, the screen black and waiting. For a moment she stared at it, her heart thudding in her ears. Then she reached for it, her thumb steady as she scrolled to a familiar name, Franklin Cole. The ring was short, no longer than a heartbeat, before his measured baritone answered. "Evelyn, everything all right?" Her lips pressed together, then parted with quiet resolve. "Franklin, I need to talk about my will." There was a pause, a shift in tone. He became the attorney she trusted, the one who never wasted words. "I have the original draft on file." "Yes, what's on your mind?" Evelyn let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding. "Jason is listed as my heir. I want that changed." "Changed?" His voice was calm, almost careful, as though he sensed the storm behind her request. "I don't want him to have everything," she said, her voice tightening. "Not after tonight. Not after the way he looks at me like I'm already gone." She could hear the faint shuffle of papers on his end, the scratch of a pen across a notepad. "Melissa involved." "Always," Evelyn muttered, eyes still fixed on Jason's printed name. "She doesn't need to be listed. She already has him by the throat." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was steady, grounding. Franklin finally spoke, his tone patient, unwavering. "Evelyn, listen to me. You control everything. Not them, not anyone else. You." Her shoulders loosened. The weight pressing against her chest seemed to ease, if only slightly. For the first time since dinner, she felt something other than humiliation. She felt possibility. Franklin's voice carried a certainty that steadied her further. Do you want me to draft new papers tomorrow? The book club met in Doris Caldwell's sunroom, where the afternoon light spilled through lace curtains and danced across stacks of paperbacks. A pitcher of sweet tea sweated on the side table, the air thick with the scent of lemon bars cooling on a tray. The other women lingered over chatter about the latest mystery novel, but Evelyn sat stiff-backed in her wicker chair, her copy unopened in her lap. Her silence didn't escape Doris. With a tilt of her head and a sharp flick of her silver bob, Doris cut through the background chatter. You look like you swallowed vinegar. Evelyn, out with it. Evelyn hesitated, but then Jason's smirk flashed in her mind, the glint of Melissa's painted nails against the wineglass, and the words tumbled out. She told them about the chowder, the Dentures joke, the laughter that had dug under her skin. The room quieted as she spoke, the faint hum of cicadas outside filling the silence where the book club usually thrummed with gossip. When she finished, Doris's hand shot down, her teacup slamming against the saucer with a sharp crack. Bite them back, she snapped. The other women flinched at the sound, but Doris's eyes gleamed with fire. Don't let that smug little brat think he's already counted your coffins and your cash. A ripple of laughter from the others broke the tension, though Evelyn didn't join in. Instead, she felt a slow warmth stir in her chest. Approval, solidarity, maybe even courage. Doris had always been blunt, but tonight her words tasted like steel. By the time Evelyn returned home, twilight had dipped Charleston's cobblestone streets into shadow. The harbor breeze followed her inside, carrying the faint salt of the sea. She set her handbag down and walked straight to her desk, a ritual she hadn't touched in years. The papers still lay where she had left them the night before, Franklin's reassurance echoing in her ears. You control everything. With deliberate care, she began stacking documents, her bank statements in neat piles, the deed to the townhouse laid flat, retirement accounts lined in order. Her fingers moved faster with each paper she touched, as though gathering armor for a battle no one else knew she was preparing. Her phone buzzed on the desk, its vibration rattling against the polished wood. The name lit the screen, Jason. Her stomach tightened, but she pressed the message open anyway. Don't forget your meds. Toothless. The words glared up at her, smug, juvenile, designed to sting. A lesser woman might have replied. Evelyn stared for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a simple flick of her thumb, she deleted it. No reply. No satisfaction. Only silence. Outside, the sound of a horse-drawn carriage clopped faintly down the street, tourists' laughter drifting like ghosts through the open window. Evelyn sat back in her chair, her documents spread before her like chess pieces waiting for the first move. She wasn't laughing. Not anymore. Her phone buzzed again. Not Jason, this time. Doris. Thinking of you. Call if you need a sword. Evelyn chuckled softly for the first time that night, the sound low but sure. She didn't text back. Not yet. She wanted to sit with the calm that came from knowing her silence was stronger than Jason's cruelty. Later, as the clock ticked toward midnight, she picked up the phone and dialed Doris. Her friend answered on the second ring, her voice brisk, expectant. Well, are we sharpening teeth, or just sipping tea? Evelyn smiled into the receiver. Both, maybe. There was a pause. Then Doris's laugh rang out loud and unbothered. Good. Because tomorrow you'll show them your teeth. The attorney's office smelled faintly of leather and old books, the kind of scent that could anchor anyone who stepped inside. Evelyn Harper sank into the chair opposite Franklin Cole's broad oak desk, her hands folded carefully on her lap. The weight of her folder rested against her thigh, every document she'd gathered last night tucked inside. Bank statements, her house deed, her retirement accounts. Franklin adjusted his glasses and gave her the kind of look that saw through hesitation. You sounded serious on the phone, Evelyn. Her lips pressed together before she spoke. They mocked me at dinner, Jason. Melissa. They made a joke about my teeth. The words tasted bitter even in the calm safety of Franklin's office. I sat there like a fool. They think I'm weak, that I'll roll over and let them strip me bare. Franklin's expression didn't change. Years of law had carved patience into his features, but his fingers drummed once against the desk. Then let's fix this. The three words cut clean through the fog. Evelyn opened her folder with deliberate hands, sliding the will across the desk, as though presenting evidence. The papers caught the morning sunlight streaming through the blinds, the neat typeface spelling out what Jason had always believed was inevitable. His full inheritance. Franklin scanned the page, his pen poised but unmoving. You want him out. Completely, Evelyn said, her voice steady now. He doesn't deserve a penny. Franklin leaned back, considering her with a lawyer's cool measure. That'll come as a shock to him, and to Melissa. That's the point, Evelyn said, heat rising in her chest. I raised Jason to be decent, to be better. He's chosen otherwise, and Melissa feeds it. I won't reward cruelty with comfort. Franklin nodded once, then pulled a fresh set of forms from his drawer. The scratch of paper against wood filled the room, sharp and decisive. He slid them across the desk, tapping the signature line. Then let's set a new future. Who do you want listed? Evelyn hesitated, not because she doubted her choice, but because speaking it aloud made it real. The Charleston Literacy Foundation. In Daniel's name, her late husband's name seemed to settle the air around them. Franklin gave a small approving smile. Fitting, he'd like that. She reached for the pen. Her hand didn't shake. The nib kissed the paper, the ink flowing smooth and dark. Evelyn Harper. With each curve of the letters, a weight lifted from her chest. Jason's entitlement, Melissa's laughter, it all dulled in comparison to the sharp satisfaction of this act. Franklin slid the signed papers into a folder with crisp efficiency. He stamped them, initialed them, sealed them away as though locking up a weapon. It's done, he said, his tone final, reassuring, filed and binding. Jason won't see this coming. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her shoulders sinking against the chair back. For the first time since that dinner, she felt taller, as though her spine had grown steel. Franklin rose, extending his hand. You've taken control, Evelyn. Don't let them forget it. She clasped his hand, firm despite the age in her fingers. I won't. The walk back through the downtown streets carried a new rhythm. The cobblestones clacked under her heels. Shop windows reflected her upright frame, and the harbor breeze smelled fresher than it had in days. She passed tourists eating pralines, artists setting up easels, and for once she felt invisible in the best way, her secret tucked inside her purse like a sharpened blade. When she reached her townhouse, the world was quiet again. The sun dipped lower, painting the brick facades in copper light. She set her bag down on the entryway table, exhaling contentment. Then her phone buzzed. The screen lit with Melissa's name, a text short and smug. Jason says we're stopping by tomorrow to talk inheritance. The satisfaction in Evelyn's chest hardened into resolve. She stared at the message for a long moment, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. Tomorrow they would learn just how sharp her teeth really were. The knock came sharp against the townhouse door. 3 hard raps that carried entitlement more than urgency. Evelyn Harper didn't rush. She smoothed her blouse, set her teacup gently on the saucer, and walked with unhurried steps across the polished wood floor. When she opened the door, Jason and Melissa filled the frame like a storm front. Jason didn't wait for an invitation. He swept past her into the foyer, his cologne clashing with the faint scent of lavender polish. Evelyn had rubbed into the banister that morning. Melissa followed, her heels clicking against the wood, her eyes darting greedily across the townhouse like a realtor casing a listing. Well, Jason said, stretching his arms wide, as though he were already lord of the manor. I forgot how much space this place has. Lot of history, lot of potential. His gaze drifted upward to the crown molding, and he smirked. Soon all this is ours. Evelyn closed the door with deliberate calm. She folded her hands neatly in front of her, the very picture of composure. Is that so? Melissa didn't answer. She was already by the sideboard, lifting a framed photograph of Evelyn and her late husband on their wedding day. She tilted it in the light, the glass catching the afternoon sun. "You were so young," she said, her tone half amused, half condescending. Without asking, she set the frame back down at a crooked angle. Evelyn walked past her, straightening the frame with a steady hand. "Some things deserve respect," she said softly. Jason chuckled, unbothered. He moved into the living room, trailing his hand across the back of the sofa as though testing the fabric. "You know Melissa's been talking about redecorating. Lighter colors, more modern. These antiques of yours, they're nice, but they're tired. Don't you think, Mel?" Melissa perched on the arm of the sofa, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "Oh, definitely. A place like this needs a younger touch. Fresh paint, updated fixtures. We could make it shine." Evelyn stood in the center of the room, the afternoon light from the bay window drawing a halo across her silver hair. Her silence pressed against them like a wall. Jason mistook it for surrender. He stepped closer, his smile wide, his voice low and smug. "Mom, you don't have to worry about a thing. You've lived your life. Soon you can just rest, and we'll take care of all this." The words settled like ash in the air. Evelyn clasped her hands tighter, feeling her pulse steady instead of quicken. She thought of the fresh ink drying on the new will, locked away in Franklin Cole's office, a shield Jason couldn't see. The doorbell rang. Sharp. Startling. Jason frowned, annoyed, but Evelyn's lips curved ever so slightly. She moved to answer it. Doris Caldwell swept in with the brisk authority of a general. She carried a tote bag slung over her shoulder and a glare sharp enough to slice marble. "I was just in the neighborhood," she announced, though everyone knew she had come with purpose. Melissa stiffened, adjusting her blouse. Jason rolled his eyes. "Perfect timing," he muttered. Doris's gaze snapped to him, cold and unflinching. "Funny, I was just thinking the opposite." She crossed the room and planted herself beside Evelyn, her presence like a fortress wall. For a long moment, the room held its breath. Jason looked from one woman to the other, his smirk faltering under the weight of their combined silence. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her nails tapping against the armrest of the sofa. Then Jason broke the quiet, leaning forward, his voice dripping venom. "You can have your little tea parties, Mom. You can sit here with your nosy friends. But you're not fooling anyone." He pointed at the walls, at the photographs, at the house itself. "This is ours. Sooner or later it'll fall into our hands." Evelyn tilted her chin, her voice calm as still water. "You sound awfully sure of yourself." Jason sneered, the mask of charm gone now, stripped bare to arrogance and menace. "If you're too weak to fight us, Mom, we'll just wait for nature." The door shut on Jason and Melissa with a final click, and Evelyn Harper stood frozen in the silence they left behind. Her hands trembled at her sides, not from weakness but from rage, the kind that coiled hot and heavy in her chest. Jason's last words, "Wait for nature," hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, clinging to her walls, her skin, her very breath. Doris reached over without ceremony and locked the deadbolt. Then she turned, her sharp eyes softening, when they fell on Evelyn. "Sit down before you crack the floor with all that anger," she ordered, her tone half stern, half protective. Evelyn let out a shaky breath and lowered herself into her armchair, her legs steady but her hands still uncooperative. Doris disappeared into the kitchen, and soon the familiar hippers of the kettle filled the house, followed by the earthy fragrance of black tea. The scent wrapped around Evelyn like a quilt, though it didn't entirely chase away the sting of humiliation. When Doris returned with 2 steaming mugs, she handed one over and perched on the ottoman across from her. "You listen to me," she said firmly. "You're not powerless, not by a long shot. They think they've got you cornered, but you've got something they'll never have." Evelyn raised the cup, the heat seeping into her palms. "What's that?" "Control," Doris replied without hesitation. "Your money, your house, your choices. They can't take that unless you hand it over, and we both know you're not handing over squat. The words steadied her, dropping anchors into the churning storm inside. She sipped slowly, letting the bitter tea cut through the bitterness in her chest. Doris was right. Jason saw wrinkles and slowed footsteps. Melissa saw outdated furniture and family photos they could toss aside. But neither of them saw the ink drying on Franklin's papers, or the fire still sharp in Evelyn's bones. As if summoned by thought, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Franklin Cole, Evelyn answered quickly. Just checking in. Franklin's steady baritone came through. I filed everything this morning. New will, donation paperwork, sealed, notarized, and binding. No loopholes for Jason to worm through. Relief flooded her, cool and cleansing. Evelyn leaned back, closing her eyes as if she could finally breathe after days of suffocation. Thank you, Franklin. You don't know how much that means. I do, he said. And remember, you're the one holding the reins, not him. When she hung up, her hands no longer shook. She met Doris's gaze and lifted her chin a fraction higher. I'm not done fighting, she said. Doris's answering grin was quick and fierce. Good, because neither am I. The moment of calm didn't last long. The phone buzzed again, this time with the hollow tone of a voicemail alert. Evelyn pressed play. Jason's voice spilling into the room. Tick-tock, Mom. Time doesn't wait forever. Neither will we. His voice was slick with smugness, but beneath it Evelyn detected something else, an edge of desperation. Jason wasn't as invincible as he liked to pretend. She deleted the message without hesitation, but her jaw clenched hard enough to ache. For a while the house was quiet again, just the sound of the harbor breeze rustling the curtains and the faint hum of traffic along the cobblestones. Evelyn and Doris sat in companionable silence, the tea cooling in their cups, strength passing between them without need for words. Then Evelyn's phone buzzed once more. Not a call this time, but a notification. She unlocked the screen, and her breath caught. Melissa's Facebook post stretched bold across the feed. Some people don't know when to pass the torch. Some people cling too long. There were already likes, little comments piling up beneath it. Smirking emojis. Agreement from Melissa's circle of friends. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen, her lips tightening into something colder than rage. The post wasn't subtle. It wasn't even about subtlety. It was war broadcast for the world to see. And tomorrow Evelyn Harper promised herself. She would answer it not with words, but with something sharper. The glow of the phone screen lit Evelyn Harper's living room, casting pale light across the antique rug and the spines of books that lined the shelves. Melissa's post sat square in the center of her feed, smug words staring back like graffiti on her front door. Some people don't know when to pass the torch. Some people cling too long. There were already comments, Melissa's friends chiming in with laughing emojis, nods of agreement, even one or two thinly veiled suggestions about greedy old folks. Evelyn's thumb hovered over the comment button, her pulse drumming. She could answer, slice back with words sharp enough to draw blood. But she didn't. Instead, she locked the phone and set it aside. The silence between her and the glowing screen louder than any reply. Not long after, the first message pinged in. A cousin from Atlanta, then another from Raleigh, each one with variations of the same question. Is Melissa talking about you? Are you okay? What's happening with the house? Evelyn typed carefully, her sentences polite, measured. I'm fine, nothing to worry about. She didn't elaborate, didn't feed the fire. The cousin sent back thumbs up emojis, reassured but still curious. She closed the conversation, exhaling slowly. Doris, of course, had already seen the post by the time Evelyn called. Well, Doris said, her voice brimming with wry amusement. Melissa thinks she's subtle. She's about as subtle as a marching band in church. Evelyn smiled despite herself. She wants me to bite. Then don't, Doris shot back. Silence is sharper than words. You don't play chess by moving every piece at once. You wait until they don't see the checkmate coming. Evelyn leaned against the counter, the phone tucked between her ear and shoulder, her gaze drifting toward the kitchen. So I wait. You wait. Doris confirmed. And maybe you bake something while you do. Muffins calm the nerves better than martinis. Later, the kitchen filled with the sweet, buttery scent of blueberry muffins. Evelyn sifted flour, cracked eggs, folded the batter with care. The hum of her oven, the warmth against her face, and the faint tune she found herself humming steadied her heartbeat more than any angry rebuttal ever could. As the muffins rose golden in the heat, she felt her silence harden into something deliberate, something powerful. By the time she pulled them out, the townhouse smelled like comfort itself, berries and sugar and a hint of cinnamon. She plated a few, set one on a napkin for Doris, and tucked the rest into a tin. Small rituals, Evelyn thought, were armor too. Her laptop chimed from the study. She wiped her hands on a towel and went to check. An email from Franklin Cole waited at the top of her inbox. Evelyn, just confirming everything is finalized. Deed secured, will secured. Everything airtight. You're in control. She read it twice, her heart lifting with each line. There was a freedom in the certainty, a shield she could lean on. She closed the laptop with a quiet smile, the hum from earlier still on her lips. Evening slipped into night. The townhouse grew still, shadows stretching across the floorboards. Evelyn carried her tea into the sitting room, the faint tang of the harbor breeze drifting in through the cracked window. She set her cup down and reached for her book, ready for a calm night. Then the pounding began. 3 heavy thuds against her front door, rattling the frame. Jason's voice, low but sharp, carried through the wood. "Mom, open up." The muffins on the counter might as well have been stones. The silence Evelyn had chosen all day was about to be tested, and the house itself seemed to brace for the storm waiting on her doorstep. Evelyn didn't flinch. She rose from her chair with the steadiness of someone who had lived long enough to know storms always come. Her steps were slow, deliberate, and when she unlocked the deadbolt, she pulled the door open without hurry. Jason shoved past her before she could say a word, the sharp scent of whiskey and cologne sweeping in with him. Melissa followed close behind, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her eyes darting across the room as if checking what was already hers. Jason spun toward Evelyn, his face tight with fury. "What the hell is going on? Why do I keep hearing things about the house? About changes?" Evelyn closed the door behind them, her voice even. "Lower your tone." Melissa's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Lower his tone. Evelyn, we should have had this house already. Everyone knows it's just sitting here waiting for us." Evelyn crossed the room to the sideboard, unhurried. She reached for the teapot she had brewed earlier, steam still curling faintly from the spout. "Tea?" she asked, as though the night weren't charged with their entitlement. Jason's fists curled at his sides. "Stop playing games. You're pathetic, you know that. Old, weak, clinging to things you can't hold forever." Evelyn's hand didn't shake as she poured into the porcelain cup. She set it gently on the table, then turned to face him. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Funny, for someone calling me pathetic, you seem awfully worried about what I'm holding." Jason's face darkened, his jaw clenching hard enough to twitch. Melissa stepped forward, her perfume heavy in the air, her voice high and cutting. "Jason's right, you're dragging this out. What do you need all this for? The house is wasted on you." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. She lifted the cup, blowing gently across the rim before taking a measured sip. When she set it down, her smile widened just enough to sting. "Melissa," she said softly, "you do realize I'm still your landlord." The words landed like a slap. Melissa blinked, her painted smile faltering, her color draining. "What?" Jason turned on her, confusion flashing across his face. "What is she talking about?" Evelyn didn't move, didn't raise her voice. Her calm was a wall they couldn't climb. "This house, this property, everything in it still mine. Not yours, not hers. And it will stay that way as long as I breathe." Melissa swallowed hard, the veneer of control slipping for the first time. Jason's fury sputtered in the air, caught between disbelief and rage. "You're bluffing," he said finally, but his voice had lost some of its thunder. Evelyn tilted her head. "Am I?" The silence that followed was heavy. broken only by the faint creak of the old townhouse settling around them. Melissa clutched her handbag tighter, as though the leather strap could anchor her. Jason paced the rug, each step sharper than the last, but he had no words left sharp enough to cut her calm. Evelyn sipped her tea again, the sound of the porcelain cup clicking against the saucer deliberate final. "You wanted a fight," she said quietly, "but I don't brawl, I win in silence." Jason's nostrils flared. He pointed at her, his hand trembling with anger. "This isn't over, not even close." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her smile steady, her voice low but piercing. "It never started." Melissa tugged at Jason's arm, her eyes still wide, unsettled. "Jason, let's go," she hissed. "Now." They stormed out, the door slamming behind them with a hollow thud. The silence that followed was rich, filling every corner of the room. Evelyn sat for a long moment, letting it settle, letting it soothe. Her phone buzzed on the table. A new message from Franklin Cole. "Your donation paperwork is finalized." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly among utility bills and catalogs in Evelyn Harper's brass mail slot. She slid it open with a paring knife, her breath catching as she unfolded the letterhead stamped with the Charleston Literacy Foundation's crest. "We are honored to confirm your generous bequest in memory of Daniel Harper. Your legacy will light the path for generations of readers." Evelyn pressed her fingertips against the paper, tracing her husband's name, where it gleamed in neat ink. For a moment she closed her eyes, and breathed in the stillness of the room, smelling faintly of lemon oil polish, and the muffins she'd baked the night before. Daniel had spent his life teaching children to love words. Now, even in death, his name would teach long after she was gone. She pulled out her checkbook, the leather cover creaking as she opened it. The pen hovered for only a moment before she wrote the numbers, the ink flowing bold across the page. A donation final, meaningful and irrevocable. She signed it Evelyn Harper with a steady hand, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it with quiet satisfaction. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Melissa, of course. Evelyn opened the message, her lips thinning at the words. "Haven't seen any checks come through yet. Jason thought you'd start settling things." Evelyn deleted it without answering. Silence was becoming her most satisfying weapon. The calls began the next day, Jason's name flashing across her screen in the morning, again in the afternoon, again at dinner. Each voicemail sounded angrier than the last, his tone straining between demand and insult. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're dragging your feet." Another, "You're embarrassing yourself." And finally, "You're punishing me for no reason. Pick up the damn phone." Evelyn let them all pile up, unheard. The messages were noise. Her will was ink-sealed and binding. By Thursday she was strolling the harbor walk with Doris, the salty air thick with the cry of gulls and the rhythmic slap of waves against the pier. Vendors shouted about fresh pralines, and tourists clustered by the railings to watch the boats. Evelyn let the sea breeze whip at her silver hair, her shoulders light for the first time in weeks. Doris, sunglasses perched high, handed her a coffee. "You look smug," she observed, her grin wicked. "I feel smug," Evelyn replied, watching a sailboat cut across the horizon. "Good. Let him stew," Doris said, sipping her drink. "I hope he chokes on his own arrogance." Evelyn chuckled softly, the sound carried off by the wind. "He's calling every day, Melissa too. They're getting desperate." "Desperation makes people sloppy," Doris said. "Let's hope he trips over his own greed." Later that evening Franklin called. His voice was calm as ever, a grounding presence. "Just checking in, Evelyn. Everything is airtight. The foundation has your documents. I've got copies sealed in my office, and your signature is locked. Jason has no legal foothold." "That's good to hear," Evelyn said, her tone even, "because he sounds like a cornered animal on my voicemail." Franklin chuckled lightly. "Let him howl. Paper wins over noise every time." Relief settled into her bones like warmth from a hearth. For the first time in weeks, she brewed chamomile tea before bed, and read 2 chapters of her novel without looking at her phone. Jason's anger was nothing more than a storm beating against closed shutters. Inside she was safe, but storms find cracks. Friday morning as gulls cried outside her window and sunlight pooled across the dining room table, her phone buzzed again. A text this time. Jason's words glared back in black letters. "If you don't stop this, I'll sue you for emotional cruelty." Evelyn stared at the screen, her breath catching, the absurdity and menace woven together in equal measure. Jason wasn't just angry anymore, he was escalating. The text still glared on Evelyn Harper's phone. "I'll sue you for emotional cruelty." The sheer absurdity of it made her laugh, low, sharp, and short-lived. Jason threatening legal action against his own mother, as though the courts were weapons he could swing without consequence. When she relayed it to Franklin Cole, his reaction was a dry chuckle that rattled warmly through the line. "Empty threats," he said, his voice calm as oak. "You can't sue someone for being alive. Jason knows nothing about the law, only about tantrums. Don't give it another thought." Evelyn allowed herself a smile. "That's easy for you to say. You deal with tantrums in court. I deal with them at my front door. And you've handled worse," Franklin replied. "Trust me, he's posturing. Paper always beats noise." 2 days later, Evelyn sat at a corner table in a downtown bakery with Doris, steam rising from their mugs and the warm yeasty scent of fresh bread wrapping the room like a blanket. The glass case glistened with powdered sugar croissants and pecan sticky buns, but Evelyn's focus was on her coffee. She stirred it slowly, the spoon ringing against ceramic, her composure intact. Across from her, Doris unfolded a newspaper, shaking her head. "Have you seen it? Jason's latest rant?" Evelyn's brows rose, but she didn't reach for her phone. "No, and I won't." Doris leaned forward, lowering her voice. "He's calling you toxic online, says you've poisoned his life, says you're unfit, says she stopped herself, folding the paper with a snap. Well, you don't need the details, it's garbage." Evelyn's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then I won't pick it up off the curb." Doris barked a laugh. "That's the spirit. Don't let him bait you." The bakery buzzed around them, clinking cups, a whir of the espresso machine, the chatter of tourists, but Evelyn remained still, grounded in her silence. Jason could scream into the void of the internet. She would not echo him. By the weekend, news circled back through whispers in Charleston. Melissa had apparently stormed out of a brunch with friends, her voice carrying across the restaurant, her cheeks flushed as she slammed her napkin down. "We should have had that house already." She'd spat, drawing eyes from every table. Someone told someone else, and by evening the story found its way to Doris, who relayed it with relish. Evelyn didn't gloat. Instead, she returned home and settled on her porch, book in hand, a soft throw blanket around her shoulders. The scent of gardenias drifted from her neighbor's yard, and the faint salt of the harbor carried on the breeze. She read by the fading light, her tea warm in her hand, and when her phone buzzed with yet another angry voicemail from Jason, she didn't even look at it. The quiet was a luxury, one she had earned, but as night fell, the quiet cracked. Her phone rang again, not Jason this time. Franklin's name lit the screen. Evelyn answered, her heart already tightening at the late hour. His voice came steady, but edged with gravity. "Evelyn, I just got word from the county office." "What kind of word?" she asked, setting her book aside. Franklin paused, as though measuring the weight of what he was about to say. "Jason just tried to forge your signature." The porch seemed to tilt beneath her. The crickets sang on in the dark, oblivious, but Evelyn's blood ran cold. Jason hadn't filed a lawsuit at all. He'd escalated into something far more dangerous. The morning light spilled across Evelyn Harper's dining table, glinting off her teacup, when her phone chimed with a new email. Franklin Cole's name sat at the top of her inbox, steady as a headline. She opened it expecting reassurance, but the attachment made her stomach tighten. Scanned documents appeared on the screen, her name, her signature, her house deed, but none of it was hers. The signature was a crude imitation, swooping too wide, the pen pressure inconsistent. It looked like a child's attempt to mimic handwriting for a school prank. Except this wasn't a prank. This was Jason. Her phone buzzed again, before she could react. Franklin's voice followed, calm but edged. I forwarded the paperwork. Jason submitted it to the county office. Claimed you transferred the property rights to him last week. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. And? They flagged it instantly, Franklin said, his dry humor breaking through. The clerk told me it looked like someone practiced your name after staring at your Christmas cards. They rejected it outright and reported it. For a moment Evelyn couldn't speak. She pressed her hand against her forehead, shaking her head slowly. He forged my name, my own son. Her words hung heavy, filling the quiet of the house, until Franklin broke it with deliberate firmness. Yes, and he failed. The attempt alone will shadow him. You're safe. When Doris arrived later that afternoon, carrying a basket of fresh rolls from the bakery, Evelyn showed her the email. Doris adjusted her glasses, scanned the forged signature, and then unexpectedly burst out laughing. A sharp, unapologetic cackle filled the room. Lord have mercy, Doris wheezed, pressing a hand to her chest. The boy's an idiot. He's digging his own grave with a toy shovel. Evelyn managed a thin smile, the humor piercing through her anger. You think this is funny? I think it's pitiful, Doris corrected, setting the basket down with a thud. He thought he could outwit the law with a shaky pen. That's not cunning, that's desperation in clown shoes. The laughter eased Evelyn's chest, loosening the coil of disbelief. That night she poured herself a glass of red wine and carried it to the porch. The air smelled of jasmine and salt, the cicadas singing their relentless chorus. She sipped slowly, savoring the tart sweetness on her tongue, each swallow tasting like quiet victory. Her phone, however, refused to let her evening stay quiet. Jason's messages came in rapid bursts, piling up like storm waves. You don't understand what you're doing. This house is mine. Dad wanted it that way. You're cruel, heartless. Pick up the phone, please. By midnight, the tone had shifted. The arrogance bled into desperation. I need this, Mom. I can't keep up. Melissa doesn't understand. Please, just call me. Evelyn set the phone face down on the table. She would not feed his spiral, not with sympathy, not with anger. She let the cicadas drown out the buzz of each incoming text, her wine glass catching the glow of the porch light. For the first time in weeks, she felt herself smiling, not out of malice, but out of certainty. Jason's unraveling no longer frightened her. It confirmed what she already knew. He was losing. The next morning, Franklin called again. His voice was steady, but there was something probing underneath. Evelyn, he said, with all of this escalating, the texts, the fraud, the threats, you have options. She leaned against the counter, the phone warm against her ear. What kind of options? There was a pause, the kind that carried weight. Do you want to rewrite your will again? Evelyn froze, the question sharp as glass. Rewrite it again. Erase Jason's name with even deeper finality. The idea lingered like a challenge. The oak-paneled office smelled faintly of ink and leather, the kind of scent that carried permanence. Evelyn Harper sat tall across from Franklin Cole, her hands resting lightly on the polished armrest. The folder of documents was already waiting on his desk, edges squared, heavy with the authority of law. Franklin adjusted his glasses and studied her with the same steady calm he always carried. You're sure, Evelyn? Her gaze didn't waver. I was sure when I walked in the first time. I'm even surer now. He nodded once, satisfied. Then we'll make it unshakable. The new draft was slid in front of her, pages crisp, the type clean and final. Her eyes skimmed the words. Jason Harper officially excluded. No rights, no future claims, no recourse. Not a cent, not a photograph, not a shred of property. Her hand stilled over the signature line, a pause not of doubt but of reverence. This was the cut that severed blood from legacy. Franklin's pen lay heavy in her hand, but her grip was steady. She signed her name, the ink gliding in strokes both firm and graceful. With each letter, the weight that Jason had tried to press onto her shoulders slid away, leaving her spine straighter. Now, Franklin said, flipping to the next page, you mentioned an increase to the foundation. Yes. Evelyn's voice softened, but not with hesitation. Daniel believed in words. He believed every child deserved books, teachers, libraries. Let them have what Jason never valued. Franklin's mouth curved into a rare smile. Beautifully said. He wrote a note, stamped the page, and placed it alongside the others. This will do more good than Jason could ever imagine. The door creaked open, and Doris Caldwell stepped inside, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, eyes bright with pride. Am I late? Perfect timing, Franklin said, sliding the witness form toward her. Doris pulled out her glasses and perched them on her nose, skimming the document with exaggerated care. Then, with a dramatic flourish, she signed, there, witnessed by yours truly. And I couldn't be prouder. Evelyn chuckled softly, the sound surprising her with its lightness. Doris's presence was a balm, a reminder she wasn't alone in this battle. Franklin gathered the signed documents into a folder, sealing them with practiced precision. He looked up, his expression carrying a quiet finality. It's done, permanently, irrevocably. Evelyn rose from her chair, her steps light as she crossed the room. The air seemed easier to breathe, as though she'd been walking uphill for months, and finally found level ground. Doris hooked an arm through hers as they exited the office, both women wearing matching smiles that spoke of victory without words. Outside, the Charleston streets stretched before them, brick and cobblestone shimmering in the late afternoon sun. The harbor breeze carried salt and the faint sweetness of pralines from a shop down the block. Evelyn inhaled deeply, savoring it. She felt lighter, freer, like she'd dropped a weight she'd carried for decades. Doris squeezed her arm. Well, how do you feel? Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with something between relief and triumph. Like I finally remembered who I am. They laughed together, their voices weaving into the hum of the city. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine the rest of her days filled with books, tea, walks by the water, not with Jason's shadow stretching over her. That evening, she set the signed witness copy on her desk, its neat pages like a shield gleaming under the lamplight. She poured herself a glass of iced tea, the cubes clinking gently, and leaned back in her armchair. Peace, long overdue, settled over her townhouse like a quilt. The phone rang, breaking the quiet. Evelyn reached for it, expecting Doris with another witty remark. Instead, Melissa's name flashed across the screen. She hesitated, then answered. Melissa's voice was unrecognizable, wet, frantic, unraveling. Evelyn, her breath hitched. Jason's gone bankrupt. The voice on the other end of the line was cracked, splintering with panic. Melissa's sobs came in gasps, words broken by sharp intakes of breath. Evelyn, you don't understand. Jason, he's bankrupt. Everything's gone. The business, the accounts, everything. Evelyn sat perfectly still in her armchair, the phone pressed lightly to her ear. She could hear the frantic clatter of Melissa moving about, maybe pacing, maybe crying into her hands, the background noise of a life unraveling. Melissa's voice pitched higher, shrill with desperation. We thought things would turn around. We had plans, investments. He just needs time, Evelyn, time and help. You don't want to see your own son ruined, do you? The words coiled like snakes, each one designed to squeeze sympathy from her. But Evelyn didn't flinch. Her gaze drifted toward the framed photo on the mantel, the one from that dinner, Jason leaning too far across the table, his smirk sharp as a blade. Careful, Mom, don't drop your dentures in the chowder. Melissa's laugh echoing too loud, covering her mouth but not her cruelty. Her lips pressed into a line. She drew in a slow breath, letting the memory of humiliation anchor her. Then, with a calmness that chilled the air, she moved the phone from her ear and pressed the red button. The call ended. Silence reclaimed the room. For the first time all week, Evelyn smiled. Later, Doris arrived with a pitcher of sweet tea and 2 mason jars clinking with ice. She poured generously, the liquid amber in the fading light of evening. She raised her glass high, her grin broad. To you, Evelyn Harper. To steal in your bones and bite in your pen. Evelyn clinked her glass against Doris's, the sound crisp, decisive. The tea was cold and sweet, running down her throat like triumph itself. To freedom, she said softly. To freedom, Doris echoed, and they drank. The next morning, the mail brought another envelope, this one thick with embossed lettering. She opened it at the kitchen table, her hands steady. Inside was a letter from the Charleston Literacy Foundation, pages brimming with gratitude. Your gift will allow us to expand our after-school reading program, purchase hundreds of new books, and support literacy workshops in underserved neighborhoods. Your husband's name will live on in every child who learns to read through this program. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes, unbidden but welcome. She laid the letter flat against the table, the words glowing brighter than any inheritance ever could. This was impact. This was legacy. Not Jason's smug grasping hands or Melissa's shrill demands, but children holding books, futures rewritten in ink, lives lifted by words. She rose, carried the letter to the mantel, and tucked it beside the photograph of Daniel. Her fingers lingered on the frame. We did it, she whispered. That afternoon, she strolled the cobblestone streets with Doris, their footsteps echoing between. Vendors sold pralines by the harbor. Gulls shrieked overhead, and the air carried the briny tang of the sea. Evelyn's shoulders were light, her spine straight. She had taken control, not only of her estate but of her story. By evening she sat on her porch, the twilight thick with jasmine and the hum of cicadas. She held a glass of wine this time, savoring the tart red against her tongue. Peace curled around her, soft and certain. Then the phone rang. Franklin's name lit the screen. Evelyn answered, expecting his usual calm reassurance, but his tone was different, low-clipped, heavy. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. I've been digging into Jason's bankruptcy filing. Her hand tightened around the stem of her glass. What about them? Franklin exhaled. He listed your house as collateral on his failed business loan. The cicadas seemed to fall silent. The air thickened, heavy with salt and disbelief. Evelyn sat frozen, the world tilting under her. Jason hadn't just tried to take her inheritance, he had gambled her home as if it already belonged to him. The words clung to Evelyn. Long after Franklin ended the call, Jason listed your house as collateral. Her house, the brick townhouse in Charleston's historic district that Daniel had restored with his own hands. The house filled with decades of their memories. The house where she read, taught, grieved, and laughed. Jason had gambled it away as though it were already his. She didn't crumble. She didn't even cry. Instead, she rose from the porch chair, set her wine glass on the railing, and straightened her shoulders. Rage burned beneath her ribs. Yes, but it wasn't frantic anymore. It was cold, steady, sharpened like steel. Jason thought she was weak. He thought she wouldn't fight. He was wrong. By morning, Franklin called again, his voice brisk and certain. I spoke with the bank. You'll be glad to know the loan officers nearly laughed him out of the building. He tried to present your property as if he already had legal claim to it. Evelyn pressed the phone close, listening as the kettle began to whistle behind her. And, Franklin continued, they checked the deed. Everything is locked under your name, notarized, sealed. His attempt doesn't just fail. It leaves a trail of fraud attached to his bankruptcy file. He has no rights to your home, Evelyn. None. The whistle grew shrill. Evelyn turned off the stove, poured steaming water over her tea leaves, and smiled. So the law agrees with what I already knew. That's right, Franklin said, warmth creeping into his otherwise formal tone. You're untouchable. The word hummed through her all morning. Untouchable. Jason could pound on her door. Melissa could sneer across a brunch table. The internet could buzz with rumors, but the law had planted a flag firmly in her corner. Later that afternoon, Evelyn slipped into her garden gloves and stepped into the small patch of earth behind the townhouse. The sun was bright, heavy with Charleston heat, and the scent of jasmine curled through the air. She knelt among the roses, pruning shears clipping with precise snips. Each cut was deliberate, each thorn handled with care. Gardening had always soothed her, but today it felt like ritual, restoring order where others tried to sow chaos. The soil was warm beneath her fingers, grounding her. Birds hopped along the fence, chirping as though mocking Jason's collapse. Evelyn hummed softly under her breath, a tune she couldn't quite place, but one that matched the rhythm of the shears. Every petal, every leaf was a reminder. Her home was hers. No forged papers, no tantrums, no empty lawsuits could touch it. By early evening Doris arrived, a bottle of Merlot in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "I heard," she said without preamble, sweeping into the garden like a queen in sandals. "Franklin told me." The bank practically laughed in his face. Evelyn stood, brushing soil from her gloves. "So they did." Doris pulled the cork with a flourish, pouring deep red into both glasses. She handed one to Evelyn and lifted her own high. "To survival. To stubborn women who don't bend." Evelyn clinked her glass, the sound crisp in the warm air. She took a sip, the wine bold and earthy, filling her chest with warmth. "To being untouchable," she said. They settled onto the garden bench, the crepe myrtles rustling overhead, the harbor breeze carrying faint salt through the air. Children's laughter drifted faintly from down the block, mingling with the call of gulls. Evelyn let it all sink in, the freedom, the certainty, the taste of victory rich on her tongue. "You know what I love best about this?" Doris said, her eyes glittering. "He thought he was clever. He thought he could outmaneuver you, and in the end he just made a fool of himself. Publicly." Evelyn smiled, slow and sure. "Good. Let the humiliation sting. Maybe he'll finally realize greed doesn't pay." But they both knew Jason wouldn't learn. Men like him rarely did. As twilight settled, the garden lights flickered on, bathing the brick walls in soft gold. Evelyn leaned back, her glass resting against her knee, the world around her hushed and perfect. For the first time since that humiliating dinner, she felt entirely at peace. She was untouchable. Her home, her choices, her legacy firmly in her hands. Her phone buzzed on the bench beside her. "It afforde wat the triffier he said. To Koningsved Folkenbels, Amaladzid." She glanced down. "Franklin again." She answered, her voice steady, calm. "Yes." On the other end, Franklin spoke with the weight of finality. "Evelyn, I just wanted you to hear it from me. The filings are complete. The rejection is sealed. It's final. Jason is out forever." Evelyn closed her eyes, the words sinking deep. Final, forever. Her house, her life, her power, safe at last. The Charleston harbor woke before she did, sunlight spilling across the water, painting the ripples in shades of gold and blue. Evelyn Harper stirred as the warmth crept across her quilt, pulling her slowly into the day. For once she wasn't greeted by worry or Jason's poison ringing in her ears. Instead, she rose with a clarity as steady as the tide outside her window. She padded downstairs, the wood floors cool beneath her slippers, and brewed her coffee the way Daniel used to, strong black, a pinch of cinnamon stirred in. The scent filled her townhouse, mingling with the faint salt air drifting through the cracked kitchen window. She carried the steaming mug to the front porch, settled into her wicker chair, and unfolded the morning paper. There it was. On page 3, beneath a photo of smiling children holding new books. Charleston Literacy Foundation expands programs. Thanks to major gift. The article described the donation, anonymous but dedicated, in memory of Daniel Harper, a man who believed words could change lives. Evelyn's heart lifted as she read. This was the legacy she had chosen. Not the greedy grasp of Jason and Melissa, but stories in children's hands, futures rewritten one page at a time. Her phone rang, vibrating gently against the table. Doris's voice spilled through, bright and familiar. "Morning warrior, you free tonight? I'm hosting book club. Theme simple victory." Evelyn laughed, a sound freer than it had been in weeks. "Victory suits me. You'll bring muffins?" Doris pressed. "Of course," Evelyn replied, her smile widening. "Blueberry. Fresh batch." "Good. And bring that new sharpness of yours," Doris added. "It deserves an audience." After the call, Evelyn set her coffee aside and noticed a large envelope leaning against the front door. She rose, curiosity stirring, and brought it inside. The embossed seal of the Literacy Foundation gleamed at the corner. She opened it carefully, sliding out a wooden plaque, presented to Evelyn Harper, in honor of Daniel Harper, for a gift that will give words to countless voices and light to generations of readers. Her throat tightened. She ran her fingers over the engraved letters, tracing Daniel's name, feeling the permanence of it under her skin. This wasn't just paper. This was proof. She had chosen meaning over greed, legacy over entitlement. She had turned cruelty into a catalyst, silence into a weapon, and ink into bite marks no one could erase. She carried the plaque into the living room, the late morning sun slanting across the walls. Carefully, she hung it above the mantel, straightening it until it was level. It caught the light, glowing against the brick, a beacon of what she had built, not for Jason, not for Melissa, but for herself, and for Daniel and for the strangers who would one day learn to read because she refused to be silenced. For a long moment, she stood back and simply looked. The plaque reflected not weakness but defiance, not endings but beginnings. She inhaled deeply, the air rich with the mingled scents of coffee and old wood, and exhaled slow, her chest light. The townhouse was quiet. Outside, the harbor gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and distant. Evelyn returned to her chair, lifting her coffee again, her eyes lingering on the plaque. A smile spread across her face, measured, calm, and deeply satisfied. Her son had tried to shame her, to strip her of dignity and power. Instead, she had carved her legacy into permanence, beyond his reach, beyond his name. He would fade into bankruptcy and bitter rants. She would endure in print, in pages in children's voices, reading aloud words they never would have known without her. The final sip of coffee was lukewarm but sweet, and she savored it. In the stillness of her townhouse, Evelyn whispered the truth out loud, her voice steady, carrying through the empty room like a vow. They called me toothless, yet my pen left the deepest bite.